All right. Hello, everyone. So this is my re-recording of the intuitive eating presentation that I did for the Lunch and Learn on March 1st. But if you didn't get a chance to see me or join, I am Brooke Lister. I am the registered dietitian here on campus. I work for Campus Rec and then also work with the Be Well program. So we'll just go ahead, jump right in and get started with the presentation. So learning objectives for this presentation, there's 4 of them. So first, participants will be able to describe the difference between mindful eating and intuitive eating. You will also be able to identify 2 reasons why diets don't work. You will also be able to identify the 10 principles of intuitive eating, and then you will also develop an understanding of the hunger and fullness scale. And I just wanted to tell you right off, the picture over in the corner is the intuitive eating book, and it is put out by 2 dietitians, Evelyn and Elise. And this is the book that I'm going to be referencing today. This is where I'm getting all of my information. It is a fabulous resource if this is a topic that you're interested in learning more about, because there are 10 principles of intuitive eating. This book talks about each one in depth. I obviously cannot talk about each one in depth, or that would take way more than an hour. So we'll just briefly get into an overview of intuitive eating, talk about a couple of the topics that I feel like are really important starting off. But this book, if you are interested in reading it, will dive deeper into each principle and give you some more like practical solutions beyond what this webinar will. And I do believe that the library has copies of this book. So if it's not something that you want to buy, they do have copies available for rent. It is also like $12 to $16 on Amazon. And there also is a new version of the book that just came out this year. Content wise, they're almost exactly the same. I believe like the biggest addition to like the newer book is just more research and more studies kind of backing up what they're saying, but both are equally as great in content. So either one of those work. So that is what I will be using today to reference for this presentation. So this is just a question for thought. Obviously, if I were doing a real presentation, I would want some more interaction in your thoughts, but where this is a recording, I just want you to kind of think about what you've heard about intuitive eating. So I know this topic is starting to become more popular. It's something that I feel like people are starting to hear about a lot more, but there's still a lot of kind of confusion with intuitive eating. I know like common responses that I get are just listening to your hunger fullness cues, eating whatever you want, honoring your cravings. But I have also heard that some people are like, oh, well, I kind of feel like it's letting myself go. Maybe I'll gain weight because I'll be eating so much more food. And so there's kind of some negative emotions or concerns with intuitive eating. So there's definitely a lot of positive, but there are also some like negative beliefs or misconceptions out there. So hopefully we'll have a chance today to kind of clear those up. But just think about kind of what you have heard either in the media, on the internet, people around you kind of trying to talk about this topic. So there is a difference between intuitive eating and mindful eating. So mindful eating kind of just relates more to just the food aspect. So allowing yourself to eat foods that are both pleasurable to you, but also nourishing to your body, and kind of acknowledging food without judgment, getting rid of like the good versus bad food labels. Whereas on the flip side, intuitive eating definitely still incorporates the principles of mindful eating, but it also has principles that are not just related to food. So they talk about joyful movement, respecting your body, having more positive body image, not feeling so negative about our bodies and the way that we look. and developing like a better sense of self, and then also emotional eating too. So intuitive eating and the principles kind of encompass a wider variety of different things related to like overall general health and well-being. So that's one of the main differences. There are some studied benefits of intuitive eating. So if you're kind of on the fence, if you're one of those where you're like, oh, I feel like I'm going to have to like let myself go, there are actually some medical benefits of intuitive eating, and then just overall like general well-being benefits. So medical benefits, you have lower cholesterol typically, and then you actually like raise your good cholesterol or your HDL. But there is a lot more just like emotional, psychological benefits too with intuitive eating. So you lower your perception of thinness being better. That's one of the big principles that's talked about throughout the book. It also lowers disordered eating and emotional eating as well. And then suppression of your own like thoughts and feelings and needs. We want to be able to honor our needs, honor our thoughts. And typically when we're on diets, we kind of suppress all of those needs because that might not be what fits with our diet. So intuitive eating kind of gets rid of that suppression and gets back to more of your natural instincts for what you need. It raises your well-being and your optimism. It increases the variety of the foods eaten because you're not following a strict diet. You're not cutting out certain food groups. You're getting a more wide variety of nutrients, of vitamins and minerals. So that's one really great benefit of intuitive eating. Increased body appreciation and acceptance. Awareness of and sensitivity to, again, your internal body sensations, your cravings. You're more in tune with what your body needs. There is more proactive coping mechanisms, and that relates back to emotional eating, and we'll talk about those a little bit more. And then just better overall self-acceptance. So this is another thought question. So why do diets not work for the majority of us? So we hear people going on diets all the time. There's like a new diet every day out there. So why do these diets, as many as there are out there, why do they not work in helping us either lose weight or manage our weight better? So that's just something to kind of think about. These are some of the main reasons though why diets don't work. So typically when we're really strict on diets, there brings on an urge or a craving for sinful foods or bad foods or forbidden foods. As you start to diet more and more and more and restrict more and more and more, you contemplate or obsess over foods that you feel like you can't have. So that's one of the main backlashes with diets, is they're typically not sustainable, they're pretty restrictive, and they don't allow you to get the wide variety of nutrients that you need. The contemplation can also increase food binges or overeating because you're contemplating or obsessing over these sinful foods. The next time you're exposed to those, you might eat more than you typically would. And that's just because those obsessions and those cravings get so strong that eventually you can overeat or binge eat. So dieting increases risk for that. It also establishes like little trust with yourself and food. So you feel like, I hear a lot like, oh, sugar is my enemy. I can't have sugar. If I do have sugar, I feel like I can't stop eating sugar. So you just feel like you have a little trust in yourself to kind of stop when you're full. Or maybe you just feel like you'll eat way too much sugar, so you just don't even allow yourself to go there. Feelings also that you don't deserve to eat. Maybe you gained a couple pounds and you're like, well, now I can't eat for a couple days because I need to lose what I just gained. So you can start to really develop some negative feelings about yourself towards eating. There's also the Last Supper mentality. So typically this is where Like the next day we're starting a really restrictive diet. So the dinner before, we're kind of going to gorge ourselves, eat all of our favorite foods because that's our last supper before our diet starts. So typically this kind of goes back to like the overeating or the binge eating. We're eating more than we would or should normally. You can also experience social withdrawal. Maybe you're on a diet and there's a lot of special events going on around you and you feel like you just can't really eat the food that are offered at those events. Food is very social. It's also very emotional. So when we feel like we can't have those foods or those foods are forbidden, we can go through withdrawal, not only food wise, but also socially and emotionally. You can also have sluggish metabolism with diets. People often are like, oh, I'm going to skip a meal. That way I can get in a calorie deficit and then I'll lose weight. But that actually hurts your metabolism more than it does help it. So we actually don't want you to skip meals. We want you to eat frequently to help keep that metabolism up and where it needs to be for your body. So with diets where we're restricting and cutting out meals, you can see a decrease in your metabolism. And then they can also increase risk for eating disorders. Not everyone that goes on a diet is going to develop an eating disorder, but for some, it can become like a form of control for them. And it can get into that unhealthy category of where you probably do have an eating disorder. So, like I said, that won't develop for all, but it definitely develops with some. So again, just another thought question. If dieting programs had to stand up to the same scrutiny as medications, would they ever be allowed for public consumption? So with new medications, if you think about like even with the COVID vaccine, you think about the trials that it had to go through and the approval processes just to get on the market. That's kind of the same process with medications. They have to be proven that there is some benefit, that they're safe overall. They have to go through clinical trials and multiple different approval processes. Diets don't have to go through any of that. They're just kind of put on the market. Anyone can publish a new diet and put it out there and claim that it's the best thing ever. So, if diets actually had to be tested, would there be as many diets on the market today? And the answer is probably not, but something I just want you to continue to think about throughout this presentation. And there's also one thing that I did want to throw out there. Dieting actually increases your risk for weight gain. So with a lot of us, we're trying to lose weight, but diets can actually have the opposite effect. So UCLA researchers, they looked at 31 long-term studies and concluded that dieting consistently is a predictor of weight gain. And then on the flip side, there's also another study done in kids aged 9 to 14 years old. And that also concluded that dieting to control weight is not only ineffective in kids, but that it may also promote weight gain. And the studies are down there if that is something that you're interested in. But I just thought I would throw that out there because this is kind of the opposite that we're trying to achieve with dieting. We're trying to achieve weight loss, not weight gain, but it can have some really negative effects on our weight. Also, just some more thought questions. Rates of eating disorders and obesity are higher than ever. So right now, I believe 42% of the US adult population is considered overweight or obese. So we're getting close to half, and that's steadily increasing year by year. So is this kind of a coincidence? Also, there are more fat-free and diet foods on the market than ever before. But again, our rates of obesity are sky high, higher than we've ever seen. We still can't seem to lose weight despite all of these diet foods. So also just something to kind of think about in the back of your head. Also, why can't we get away from the diet mentality? What's kind of keeping us going back to these diets? Definitely probably weight loss and the promises that all of these diets have, like you'll lose a bunch of weight in a month. So just kind of think about why, either you personally or just thoughts in general, why we can just not get away from diets. So first, we really have to hit diet bottom. and be ready to accept the process of getting back to our natural instincts, honoring our inner hunger fullness cues. And really, we have to hit that bottom before we're even ready to accept intuitive eating. So just getting to this kind of like breaking point before you can even like let intuitive eating in. So you really have to hit rock bottom before you can kind of change your ways and kind of reject that diet mentality that we've been talking about. So this is where we'll get into a little bit more about intuitive eating. So we'll briefly go through the 10 principles. We'll talk about making peace with food and then filling your hunger. And then I have a little bit on emotional eating too, because I feel like that's really important and I get a lot of questions on that. So we'll dive into that a little bit more. So the first principle of intuitive eating is rejecting the diet mentality. So that kind of goes back to the previous slides that we were just on, why we can't reject the diet mentality. We have to hit rock bottom first. All of those thoughts that I kind of had you think about. The second one, we'll get into this one, is honoring your hunger. So I won't talk too much about that one. The third is making peace with food. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit too, but getting rid of foods are good and foods are bad. There's a different analogy that we like to use. We'll talk a little bit about that too. For challenging the food police, so this really relates to like the morality that we attach to food. So, apples are bad or good and chocolate cake is bad. We attach good versus bad food labels. And food, definitely, there's some that are more nutritious than others, give us more vitamins, give us more minerals, more good, healthy, balanced nutrients. But that doesn't necessarily mean that chocolate cake is bad. And we need to kind of get away from the morality of food. So, because typically we will be like, oh, I ate chocolate cake, that's bad. So therefore, I'm a bad person. And foods do not make us a bad person. They don't make us a good person. So kind of detaching from that morality with food. 5, filling your fullness. 6 is discovering the satisfaction factor. 7 is related to emotional eating. So learning how to cope with your emotions without using food. 8 is respecting your body. So this is kind of like that positive body image, high self-worth, high self-esteem that I talked about in the beginning. 9 is exercising to feel the difference. So moving your body because it feels good for you. Maybe it gives you more energy to go throughout your day. Like you could just feel better about yourself when you exercise, and not exercising because you feel like you need to burn calories or to lose weight, but really moving because you enjoy it. And then 10 is honoring your health with gentle nutrition. So the first thing that we'll talk about is making peace with food. So this was the third principle that we talked about. These are 2 ways to kind of think about the cycle of dieting and what kind of consequences that leads to. So typically you start a new diet, you pick one of the hot new fad diets out there. You're like, I'm going to be really good and follow this to the T, and I'm going to lose X amount of weight. So you're doing really good on this diet. Typically, people can do good for a couple days to a couple weeks, depending on how restrictive the diet is. But generally, as we get farther and farther into it, we start to feel deprived of certain foods that we can't have or we feel like are forbidden. And we start to kind of obsess or contemplate eating those foods. And the deprivation is really high. So if you look on the Seesaw scale, so this over here is meant to be a seesaw, and it's called Seesaw Syndrome. So with the feeling deprived and kind of the circular picture, this deprivation seesaw over here, when you start a diet, you're doing really good, but you're restricting, your deprivation's high. eventually we're going to have like an overwhelming urge to eat. So whatever those foods are that we've kind of been contemplating or obsessing about, we're eventually going to have like an overwhelming desire to eat or consume those foods because that's just a part of who we are naturally. So we're going to have this overwhelming urge, which leads us to binge eat or overeat. And then typically after we binge eat or overeat, we feel like we're out of control. We feel really guilty. We feel ashamed because we just ate way more food than we probably needed. And typically it's those bad foods that I talked about, even though foods aren't inherently good or inherently bad, we believe that they are. So we binge on these bad foods and then we just feel bad about ourselves. So then we're like, oh, we're going to get back on our diet to regain control. I just ate way too much chocolate cake. So now I'm going to go back on my diet to kind of lose all of that weight that I just maybe gained from the chocolate cake. That's our thinking. So we get back on our diet to regain control. And then we just still continue to go through the cycle. So it's hard to kind of break this cycle. We just keep continually going through it with each new diet that we start. So same thing over here. Once you binge eat, the guilt on this side is going to rise up. Your deprivation is going to come down because you just ate whatever food you were obsessing over, but your guilt's going to be really high. So again, this kind of seesaw syndrome of that tilting constantly is what leads to rebound dieting. Same thing over here. You get stuck in this circle, and that just kind of leads to, we like to call it yo-yo dieting. We're just constantly on and off diets, but we are really trying with intuitive eating to break this cycle and just get away from dieting altogether. So the key to kind of making peace with food and honoring your hunger is allowing yourself the unconditional permission to eat. And I know this can be really scary for some people because you may feel like you're going to eat way more food than you need, or you're going to have way more perceived like unhealthy food than you need, but that's okay. And that's part of the intuitive eating process, is allowing yourself to have those foods that maybe you've previously not allowed yourself to have. And that's how we break the diet cycle and get more into that intuitive eating kind of thinking. So how to abolish like that pattern of restraint is to throw out, again, the preconceived notion that foods are good and foods are bad. I feel like I've talked about this a lot, but getting away from those food labels and going towards most of the time foods and some of the time foods. That way we are not indicating morality with our labels. Most of the time foods are obviously going to be your whole grains, all of your fruits and your vegetables and your lean proteins. And then your some of the time foods are obviously going to be all of like your grain-based desserts. So your cookies, your cakes, your donuts, your pastries, all of those things that are really sugary and taste really yummy. And some of the time foods can also include like ice cream or soda or more processed foods. So getting away from good versus bad and moving towards most of the time and some of the time. All foods do have a place in the diet. I just want to throw that out there. So that's why we're trying to shift those labels. It really is about everything in moderation, because you can also have too much of a good thing. You can eat too many apples. You can eat too many carrots, and that's still not good for you either. We need a wide variety of different nutrients. Second is eating what you really want. So what sounds good to you? Your body, if you let it honor its natural instincts, is really, really good and really efficient at telling you what you need. And a lot of us with dieting just kind of suppress those cravings, suppress what our body's telling us. But if we listen to that, then typically we can get what we need. And our body is usually trying to tell us something with our cravings. So eating what you really want, whatever your craving is telling you. And then also third is eating without condition. So I know a lot of the times I hear just generally like out there in the population, if they are on a diet, they're like, okay, I'm gonna have cheesecake today, because maybe there's some special event going on. Maybe it's a birthday or you're celebrating an anniversary or something special is going on. And then tomorrow, when that event or whatever it is over, you're like, hey, I'm going to go back to dieting. So I can have cheesecake today because something's going on, but tomorrow I'm going to get back on my diet. So that's eating with conditions, is I'm going to eat this now, but my condition is tomorrow I'm going to be good again. So eating and removing those conditions and knowing that, hey, I can have cheesecake whenever I want. I might have to go to the store and get it, but it's always going to be available. So you don't obsess or heavily contemplate having that piece of cheesecake. So all of these three really eliminate the urgency to overeat or binge eat, like we've been talking about. So allowing yourself unconditional permission to eat whatever foods that you want. And this is a common fear that I get. So I fear I won't be able to stop eating a favorite food once I start. And this is very valid. It can be really scary, especially if you've been dieting for many, many years, to kind of let go of that diet mentality and kind of let yourself eat maybe foods that you've been trying to avoid for a long time. It can be really scary because you might feel like you might get out of control. But this has been studied. So when you know that previously forbidden foods will always be allowed, the urgency to have like large quantities of them eventually goes away or dissipates. So this is actually called habituation. And like I said, it's been studied. So multiple studies have shown that the more a person is exposed to a particular food, even if it's like your most favorite food in the world, the more you're exposed to it, the more you know that you're allowed to eat that food and it's not being restricted, the less appealing it becomes over time. So one of the examples that I like to use to kind of explain this concept a little bit better is leftovers. So say you get on Pinterest, you find a recipe, you make this really big meal, and it makes a ton of leftovers, and you're eating whatever it is for like a week. Typically by like day 2 or day 3, you're just kind of sick of those leftovers. They don't even sound good anymore. You don't want to eat them. Maybe that's when you go to the TSC or go somewhere on campus and buy lunch because you're like, I can just not stand the thought of even like having to eat that food again. So same kind of concept. Even if it's your favorite food, you're eventually going to get tired of eating it. So just keeping that thought in the back of your mind is eventually your cravings for those foods will dissipate and you'll actually start to crave other things that you might typically not have craved anymore when you let go of that restriction and that control that foods have. So the next concept is feeling your fullness. So most of us belong to the clean plate club, especially growing up. So if your parents made you finish or clean your plate before you could get up from the dinner table, that has good intentions with it, but it can actually be really harmful, especially as a child. So children are actually the best intuitive eaters. As they start to grow up, everyone becomes less and less of an intuitive eater. And that's just because of like the diet culture that we're living in. The little kids are actually the best intuitive eaters. They know when they're hungry, they know when they're full. They're really good at judging that because they have those natural instincts that we are trying to get back to as adults with intuitive eating. So as we kind of go throughout life, we lose these natural instincts. So actually making your kids finish the plate when they tell you they're full can be more harmful and allow them to not really honor those hunger and fullness cues. So cleaning our plate or being encouraged or pushed to eat, those will not help us get in touch with our inner eating signals. There are also other reasons why we might disregard our hunger and fullness cues. And that just could be respecting the value of food. I know right now we're hearing about inflation and prices of food going up. And so you obviously don't want to waste the valuable money that you are investing into food. So you want to get the value out of that by eating is whatever is on your plate and eating all of it because you don't want to waste it. Another reason to over or undereat is beginning a meal or a snack in an overly ravenous state. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that with the hunger fullness scale, which I believe is on the next slide. But we don't want to get so hungry throughout the day that we just overeat or binge eat because we're just so hungry. And that will make sense when I show you the hunger fullness scale. But how do you think that you can recognize a comfortable satiety? So, what are some signs that you can tell you're starting to get full? And I know this is like a really hard question for a lot of people because typically we can tell when we're hungry. Our stomach growls, we might feel irritable, or some people like to describe it as hangry. Maybe you're lightheaded. Maybe you have low energy levels. Maybe you're starting to get a headache. There's a lot more ways to tell that we're hungry, and it's extremely more difficult to tell that we're full. Even for me too, sometimes I still have trouble recognizing, like, am I truly full? Can I eat a little bit more? Am I overstuffed? So it's really a delicate balance. So how do we find that comfortable fullness? So just 3 tips that I have to kind of better fill your hunger is you can stop eating food when it starts to not taste as good as it did when you started eating. So an example that I like to use is if you haven't eaten like all day, say you ate breakfast at like 7 or 8 o'clock, but then you didn't have time to eat lunch, you haven't had time to eat a snack, maybe it's a busy day at work. So you just haven't eaten anything since 8 a.m. And then you get home, maybe at 5 or 6 p.m. and start cooking dinner. That's a really long period to go without eating for your body. So maybe you're making spaghetti and it's not anything special. It's just regular spaghetti, but you sit down to kind of eat it and you're like, oh my heavens, this is the most amazing spaghetti I've ever had in my whole entire life. This tastes so good. It's probably tasting so good because you haven't eaten for a long period of time. It's not a special spaghetti. It's the spaghetti that you normally make, but it tastes really good because you haven't had consistent fuel for your body throughout the day. And then as you get through that spaghetti dinner, you start noticing maybe like half of the way through or 3/4 of the way through that, oh, this is not tasting as good as it did when I started eating. It's still a really good spaghetti, but it's not the most amazing spaghetti dinner of my whole entire life. So that's one way to kind of tell that you're starting to get full or you are full, is food just isn't tasting as good. You also might not be eating as fast as you did at the beginning. So if we're really hungry, we're going to scarf a lot of food down quickly because, it's our first chance that we've eaten in a little while. And at some point, you're going to slow down. So when you start to slow down, that's another sign that you could start feeling full. Typically, you also stop thinking about food or your thoughts about food lessen, and you just want to eat till you're comfortably full. So you don't want to be overly stuffed. You don't want to feel like you're sick, but just eating until you feel satisfied and you're comfortably satiated. Also, eat without distraction or take mini breaks while you're eating. So a lot of us now will turn on the TV or get on our cell phones or check emails or do whatever it is while we're eating. We kind of try and multitask. If we are like watching TV while we're eating, we're not really paying attention to our hunger and fullness cues. We might eat more than we need because we're not kind of checking in with ourselves frequently. We're eating with a distraction and we're not really thinking about how much we're eating. So, for example, if you are watching a movie, you take a bag of potato chips over and watch your movie as your snack. You could just be watching your movie, be mindlessly munching on those potato chips. And then when you do like take a break, you're like, oh my gosh, I've eaten half the bag. You know, it was a full bag when I started, and you're just not thinking about it. So either eat without the distraction. So turn the TV off, get rid of the cell phones, whatever that may be, or just take mini breaks throughout the eating process just to check in with yourself and make sure that you're not overly stuffed or overly full. Make sure that you're still eating because you're hungry. And then, like I said, going back to one of my previous slides, don't feel obligated to clear your plate. If you get 3/4 of the way through and you feel like I'm comfortable, I'm full, I really don't need any more, food's not tasting as good, don't feel obligated to clean your plate. Don't feel like you have to eat everything on there. So this is the hunger and fullness scale that I have kind of been referencing throughout the presentation. So we like to compare our bodies in nutrition to a car. So if you think about a car, you can't drive it on empty. So we don't want you to drive your body on empty either. So we don't want you to be at a 1 or a 2 ever. We all get to this point. We all get to that point with a car. Sometimes we let it run to empty and then our gas light comes on and it's like, hey, you really need some gas. But we don't want to get over here as much as possible if we can prevent that. Going back to the car, you go to the gas station, fill your car up, and you hear that click when it's full. We as humans are also aiming for that same click. So this kind of goes back to filling your hunger, getting that comfortable feeling of fullness. So for us, a comfortable fullness is a 6 or a 7. So that is our click, as if we were a car. And then going back to the car, you can fill more gas in your car once you hear that click. Like you can go past the click. And that's when we get into like the 9 or the 10. You can fill your car as much as you want, but eventually gas is going to start flowing out because your tank can't hold an unlimited amount of gas. And for us, that's a 9 or a 10. So you just really feel uncomfortably full. Maybe you're stuffed, you just feel sick, you feel nauseous, and you just don't feel good at all. So we're trying to avoid both ends of the spectrum. So if you think about like a pendulum, we don't want to get to either end. Typically, the farther we swing on one end, that ball's going to swing the other end really far. So if you start at a 1, you're going to be so ravenous and starving that you feel really dizzy, you feel starved, you're getting really crabby, you're going to eat something, but then where that pendulum is so far over on that side, it's going to swing the other side really far. So you could end up at a 9 or a 10 and just feel sick, feel really uncomfortably full. So we're trying to prevent getting to either of these extreme ends. So like I said, we want to start eating at like a 3 or a 4. So your stomach's starting to growl, you're getting those hunger pains, you're starting to think about what you want to eat, you're starting to think about what time you want to eat, what you want to eat. Maybe you feel like you can wait at this point, but when you start developing those feelings for food and those thoughts, typically that's a good sign that we're getting hungry. So identifying when you're at a 3 or a 4, you can let your stomach growl. Once it's growling, we want to be sure to fuel our bodies. So we want to, like I said, get to the 6 to 7 range. So we don't want to end at a 5. 5 is just like neutral. You're not hungry, but you're not full. You're just a good like in between. We don't want to end here because then we might feel like, oh, in an hour I need to eat again because I didn't eat enough at the last meal. So we really want to identify that click, like our gas tank, at that 6 or 7. So you feel nicely satisfied, you're comfortably full, but you're not overly full. Like you didn't eat Thanksgiving dinner and feel like you have to like go unzip your pants and lay down on the couch and take a nap. So really identifying triggers for you that will allow you to identify if you are at this 6 to 7 range. And it does take a little while to be able to identify this range, especially if you have been dieting for a while. We're really good at drowning out like our internal hunger and fullness cues while we're dieting. So it could take weeks to even months to kind of be able to recognize those hunger and fullness cues better. So this is something that just takes a little bit of time. You're not going to be able to identify those overnight, and you're going to go through a lot of trial and error. So maybe, yeah, like Papa Murphy's pizza, and you have like four slices of pizza the first time you eat it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that was way too much. I ended at like a 9. I didn't feel very good. So next time you have pizza, you're like, okay, I'm gonna see maybe if 2 or 3 slices is better. And you should be able to learn from previous exposures to a food, kind of your comfortable amount of food that will get you to that click. So just like pay attention to previous experiences and kind of gauge off those and just learn from those. Obviously, there's going to be times where you may overeat, but just learn from that and be patient with yourself, because like I said, it can take a little while to get those hunger fullness cues back. So we're going to talk about emotional eating a little bit. Like I said, this is a common thing that I see with a lot of people is we definitely emotional eat, and I am not exempt from this. But like I said in the beginning, food is very social and it is also very emotional. We like to use food as a coping mechanism to make us feel better when we're sad, when we're depressed, when we're lonely. But we also use food to celebrate the happy events too in our life. So, like birthdays or weddings or special events, or maybe we just got a promotion at work. So, we're going to go out and celebrate. It can celebrate both happy and sad, but a lot of us do use food to cope with whatever emotions we're dealing with. So the book, the Intuitive Eating book, goes a lot more into detail about this. But we typically, as much as we use emotional eating, food is just a band-aid temporarily for a little while. So food's going to make us feel better in the short term, maybe. But on the flip side of that, if we overeat or binge eat when we're emotional eating, we're going to feel horrible about ourselves because we just ate a large quantity of food that we didn't necessarily need. And then we start to get down on ourselves. So food makes us feel good for a minute, but it is not a long-term coping mechanism. Not saying that if you start practicing intuitive eating, you're never going to emotionally eat. We're all going to have those times where, we do emotionally eat. But on the flip side of that, thinking about when you are feeling that emotional need to eat, some of us just need like that hand to mouth motion that just makes us feel comfortable. But just some questions to kind of ask ourselves when we feel these emotions coming on. First one is, am I hungry? So am I biologically or physiologically hungry? That is different than emotional hunger. So typically with emotional hunger, we're never going to feel full. We're never going to feel satiated. We can eat as much food as we want, but we're never going to get those fullness cues that we have talked about. And there's definitely a difference between emotional hunger and physiological hunger. So identifying, am I truly hungry? Second one is asking, how do I feel? What emotions am I feeling? Am I feeling negative emotions? Am I feeling positive emotions? Identifying what emotion you are feeling that is leading you or urging you to emotionally eat. And then once you've identified that emotion that you're feeling, asking yourself, what do I actually need? What would help me feel better for this emotion? And that is super important, is to determine other activities that we can use or do that are more long-term coping mechanisms for the emotions that we're feeling. So on the next slide, these are like the top 3 reasons that people typically emotionally eat. And this can be the same for you, but it can also be different. These emotions are different for everyone and their order can change. So I just want you to think about what are maybe the top 3 emotions why I personally emotionally eat. But typically boredom, so maybe we hit like that 2, 3, 4 p.m. like midday stretch in our work day, and we're just feeling really bored. We don't feel motivated, so maybe we turn to food because we're bored, or to get a little motivation because we think that will be helpful. Also stress, that's definitely a big one if you have like deadlines at work coming up, or even just stress in your family or the environment that you're in. And then also loneliness. So on the flip side, on the other side of this screen, just some ways to fill this void without using food. And it might be a different activity for each of the emotions that you identify. So maybe if you're lonely, you're going to want to talk to someone, you're going to want to serve someone. Maybe you go out and do something with a friend or a spouse or whoever it may be. You go out with your kids, just going out and doing something with someone if you're feeling lonely. If you're feeling stressed, maybe you want to do some arts and crafts or one of your favorite hobbies, or maybe you love being outdoors, getting some sunshine when it's warm, and being outside is something that's comforting to you that allows you to deal with that stress. And maybe boredom, maybe you turn to reading or coloring, or maybe the same arts or crafts or hobbies. So just identifying, and it's super important to be able to identify the emotions and then ways to kind of more efficiently cope with what we're feeling. So it can be pampering yourself, self-care. So maybe if you're feeling sad or depressed, you definitely want to take care of yourself. So maybe you take a bath or listen to some music. Exercise can be really great. So just identifying whatever activities for you will allow you to fill the emotional void without using food, because it is important that we're able to identify more long-term and more appropriate coping mechanisms that will actually help us feel better about ourselves. And then last kind of point with this presentation is weight doesn't equal worth. So as much as the thin ideal is idolized in our society, we were all built different for a reason. We were not built to be cookie cutter, look all the same, have the same interests, the same hobbies. Our body sizes are designed to be different. And so with intuitive eating, we're learning to accept our bodies as they are and not trying to morph those into something that we are not. So to accept the model of intuitive eating, you have to be able to emphasize functionality of your body over appearance. So getting rid of my weight like equals worth, like rejecting that mentality, because there are so many functional aspects of our body that we should be grateful for more than just our physical appearance or our weight. So like I said, that means forgetting about the thin ideal. We see it all over social media. If you eat this in a day, you're going to look like me. If you do this workout, you're going to look like me. And someone could do that exact same eating pattern or the exact same workout, and they are not going to look like the person that's modeling that behavior. And that's just because all of our bodies are different. We're designed different. Our genetics are different. So we're not all going to be able to achieve that thin ideal. And that thin ideal too necessarily isn't always healthy. We might see a skinny model on Instagram, but maybe she could have an eating disorder. Maybe there is, maybe not an eating disorder, but some disordered eating patterns. So just recognizing that food is fuel, food is nourishment. It doesn't equal worth. Our weight doesn't equal worth. Our bodies are designed to be different. So we should be us, and emphasizing the functionality over appearance. So one last thing to think about that I just want you to take away from this presentation is, what is one thing that you're grateful that your body is able to do? So maybe you have grandkids. Maybe you're thankful that your body allows you to play with your grandkids. I know for me, I'm just finishing school right now, so I'm grateful that I have a brain and a body that allows me to study and do good in my classes and get through school. Maybe you're Maybe you love hiking. Maybe that's one of your big interests. So maybe you're thankful that your body allows you to go on all the hikes that you love to do, and it's able to push itself through those hard hikes. So just emphasizing at least one functionality of your body that you're grateful for can be a really positive thing to kind of take away from this. That's not weight-based, that's not appearance-based. So that is my presentation on intuitive eating. If you are interested in learning more, there's definitely like more that can be talked about with intuitive eating. And I believe, and we're in the process of this, but getting like a 4 to 6 week course or a series of classes on intuitive eating, just so we can dive deeper into these principles of intuitive eating, because I can talk a lot about it in an hour, but it's definitely something that needs more practice and more exposure. So I will continue to work with Be Well on this to get a series developed, so that if you are interested in learning more, you can get more information. But like I said at the beginning, you can also reference the book too, if that is something that you're interested in. And then lastly, I will just put a plug here too, that you can also meet with me individually if this is a topic that you want to talk about more, or if there's something different nutritionally that you want to talk about. Anything from eating healthy on a balanced budget or meal planning, or maybe you have diabetes or heart disease. It can be anything medical too. Any wide variety of concerns, I am able to meet with you on those. So if you are interested in scheduling a consultation with me, you can go to the Be Well website. They have a link there with my information. It will link you to an external scheduling program through Calendly. You can look at my availability there and then pick a meeting time that works for you. Typically, I meet with employees on Monday afternoons and then Wednesday mornings. So get on there and look at my schedule if that is something that you are interested in. And they will also have you fill out like a 7-question questionnaire just so I can get to know your needs a little bit more. And that can count for your Be Well Rewards program if that is something that you are participating in. And you will need an initial consultation and a follow-up for those to qualify for the full reward. And those sessions can be done either in person or Zoom. So if you are on a statewide campus, Zoom is an option, or if it's just easier for you to not have to leave your office, we can totally do Zoom. But either way, and I am stationed in the ARC primarily. So that is where my office is if you ever need to find me or have any questions. But I will go ahead and just end this recording. I also have a handout that I will be sending Alyssa with the 10 principles of intuitive eating. So maybe you can put it on your fridge or somewhere you'll see it with just a brief little description of each. And then you'll kind of have that as a reference if you couldn't remember all of the principles today. So thank you guys so much for being patient with all of the technology issues that we had on Tuesday. And hopefully this recording is helpful for you. Thank you so much.